Hey, what's up everybody? Mark Yan again. Guess what? I'm kind of freaking out about this video right now.
Freaking out.
The reason is because it is probably the most important video I will ever make on this YouTube channel. This is the 7 steps you need to take, internalize, understand, and follow to a T if you want to turn a home that you live in, that you own, into a rental property. So without further ado, let's kick it. Step number 1 is you've got to run the numbers. No surprise there, because when you PCS or you move away and you leave the property and you're going to get tenants in it, you need to know if it's actually going to cash flow. Moreover, it's even more important to make the decision of, wait, maybe you don't even want to keep this as a rental. Sometimes properties just aren't worth it. Like if you find out that you're going to be making, I don't know, $5 cash flow a month.
$5.
What if it just has so much equity that whatever cash flow it is, you know that if you used that money, if you sold it and pulled that money out and rolled it into other investments, that maybe it'd be making a heck of a lot more for you, then it might not be worth it to keep every single rental property. And in this case, a lot of times when you do move into a primary residence, sometimes we choose the nicer home instead of like the fixer-upper. And a lot of times we might be in that predicament. It's not a bad thing. A lot of times we get to build some kind of sweat equity in it. It doesn't mean it'll always be the best rental when we move out. So it's important to run those numbers before you go to step 2. Oh, but actually before I go to step 2, if you don't know how to run the numbers, if you want to just learn about the basics, I'm going to link a video over here, I believe, somewhere, and then you can watch that. Or you can also go to our website, activedutypassiveincome.com, where we talk about that ad nauseum. We have tons of free resources and courses about running numbers, finding properties, and investing in real estate for military families. All right, step number 2. If you have made the conscious decision, the intentional decision that you are going to keep the property as a rental because you think it's going to cash flow or appreciate or a combination of those two, then you've got to take a look at your financing situation. What's your interest rate at? Could you make it better? This is super important because if you're still living in the property, you can establish owner-occupied financing, which is typically better than if it was not owner-occupied, meaning if you now live elsewhere and it is already a rental property, it is now not occupied by you anymore. The financing is typically a little bit riskier for the lenders, and so you'll find that the interest rate might be a little bit higher. So again, long before you move out, definitely check with a lender and make sure that you're making the right decision about your financing situation before you move out of the property. Step number 3, if you want to be more hands-off, which most of us at Active Duty Passive Income, our team especially, is a big fan of being pretty hands-off of our investments. We don't want them to become like these emotional burdens that we're constantly worrying about, is we hire professional property managers. And that's something you should think about. There's nothing wrong with self-managing at all. In fact, me and my mom manage some of our properties ourselves. However, it is important to understand what your goal is, what your lifestyle aspirations are, and how many rental properties you're planning on getting. Because if you start self-managing a whole ton of them, you might realize that this becomes a full-time job. That's something you really want to consider. Go to a real estate meetup, reach out to us, reach out to a trusted agent. We know tons of them in basically every single area of the United States to see if they can recommend a trusty property manager when it's time to do this. Step number 4, make sure you get a solid rental property insurance policy with liability insurance. It is important to make sure that you have like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever. Don't quote me. I'm not giving you advice on how much to get. This doesn't happen often, but it is not unheard of that if something happens on your property, God forbid, and you are the owner, you might end up liable. And then guess what? If you end up getting sued, you need to have insurance for that, right? Now think about it this way. Insurance companies have a lot of money, and their basic business model is to not give that money back to those that they're insuring. They hope that you never have a claim, that you just keep paying them the premiums, and then they get to keep it and use that and invest it elsewhere, but also use that to pay their employees and to grow their company, so on and so forth. So they invest a lot of their money into attorneys to be able to fight somebody trying to get their money for a claim, like somebody suing, you on your liability policy. They have the best attorneys possible. So use that to your advantage. Get a solid liability policy to make sure you and your family and your investment is protected. Now, step number 5, as I alluded to in the previous step when we were talking about insurance, is you can also do this as a second layer of protection. You can basically deed your property over to an LLC. And what this does is it adds an extra veil, so to speak. They call it the corporate veil, and it gives you more protection as long as you do it right. Now, I'm not an attorney, so don't take this as me giving you any kind of legal advice. The point is, if you're able to have a company run a property as one of its assets, there's an operating agreement and a bank account and everything governing that done properly, you now have an extra layer of liability protection as the owner of both that company and the property. Oftentimes people think that an LLC will completely protect them. This is not true. Another misconception is that people think that oftentimes they will no longer be traced to the asset, so the property will no longer be able to trace back to them, as in if somebody wants to find out who owns the property, that somehow there's like this magical veil that like makes you invisible. No, that's not a thing. The reality is, if you owned that property and the financing on it was in your name, it's still in your name, even though it's in an LLC now. So just keep that in mind. Step number 6 is make sure that you're counting depreciation against your rental profits. Here's why. The IRS is going to have you depreciate your property regardless. They're going to consider you depreciating it whether you actually end up doing it or not, because that is the rule. That's how they operate. They consider your asset to be losing value over time, and so they need to count that against the profits that you're making. And then as a result, you pay little to no taxes on your cash flow, which is awesome. The only thing you have to remember is if you ever sell this property down the road, I recommend you do a 1031 exchange so you can kick that deferred tax liability down the road instead of having to incur it. At the end of the day, it's always beneficial to defer taxes as long as those tax savings you actually put to work and do something with it instead of just spending it. Because if you do end up selling that property without actually being smart about your tax planning, and all of a sudden you have to pay for all those, they're called unrecaptured 1250 gains, that's gonna hurt if you do not anticipate that happening. But hey, the bottom line is if you own an awesome rental property, you can often pay little to no taxes on the cash flow that you're putting in your pocket. And so you want to do that because now you're able to start the cash flow snowball and start saving that up for the next rental property, which brings me to step 7. Step 7 is if you want to acquire more of these, you should be saving for your next one, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can acquire rental properties. You can use other people's money to acquire the next one, then pay them back after you add value to it or whatever. There's an unlimited amount of ways you can actually kind of skin the cat of acquiring the next property to add to your portfolio. However, if you want to look at it in just like traditional terms or just like very simple terms, like, hey, you save up money, you now have enough for a down payment, you get another rental property, boom, that rental property gives you cash flow. That cash flow every single month plus your monthly savings hopefully adds up to another pile of money that you can then use as a down payment for the next rental property. And then this snowball just continues and continues and continues. That's what we preach all day, every day, is increase your cash flow and have the cash flow that you already made help increase that cash flow even more. Kind of like just have it accelerate so that in however many years, whatever your goals are, whatever your savings are, whatever you are able to accomplish can happen faster than just doing it like one at a time at the same rate. Really try to like have the machine feed itself. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's all 7 points. This is Mark Yancich again. If you guys are not familiar with our channel, please subscribe, hit the like button, share, or even comment. Let us know if you have any questions. Our website is activedutypassiveincome.com, and we're all about helping military families achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. All right, take care. Bye.